Yo, what's good, guys? It's your favorite sick American here. Yeah, been no uploads for a couple of days because I've been sick. Still a little sick. Been trying to sleep it off, but I can't sleep right now, so, YouTube video, here we come. But if I'm coughing and shit, y'all know why.
Put you in the shoes of the Allies in 1945. Congratulations! You've just won the biggest war in history. Quick question, what are you gonna do with Germany? Because, World War III would not be fun, and your constituents all agree that a world without Nazis would be best for everyone. You could try suppressing the country so far down they can never rise up to be a serious threat again, but, well, you tried that at the end of World War I, and look how far that got you. And besides, you'd better make sure that the new government has everything it needs to be stable and won't be supplanted by other regional or rebel factions like Afghanistan or Iraq. What if you split up Germany into a bunch of smaller countries? That way they can all industrialize and develop and get...
My man's put one of the countries. I was stupid. That's tough.
...rich however they please, but none
That's
of
the
them
country I
will
wanna
be
be
too
from.
powerful to threaten the whole world again. Not a bad idea, but... well, that's sort of what Napoleon did in 1806, and it wasn't too long before somebody started putting all the pieces back together, and they did it by creating the most heavily militarized population in the entire world. I mean, if you really want a say in how things are run in Germany, you could try annexing it, but on top of conquest being a big yikes, who's gonna get it? That's gonna be a big upset to the balance of power, not to mention incredibly expensive. You just spent all your money fighting the biggest war in history. Your third world colonies are getting uppity already, so good luck with that. You definitely can't just leave Germany alone, because what's gonna happen if you give the vote back to the Nazis? You're just gonna get Hitler 2.0, right? This video is sponsored by
Respectfully, my friend, I'm not in the mood to listen to your sponsors, bro. I don't got time for this. Is there a code I can put out
parts
there?
of your family tree for you. You might end up discovering relatives you didn't even know you had, especially if you're a person of German ancestry living in Argentina. Instant discoveries will
Come on,
also
man.
pull up photographs
Hurry
of your
up.
relatives
Where's the
and
thing?
MyHeritage them. If you use the QR code on screen or the
Yo, do my man's thing. Make my man some money.
link in the description, you can get access to everything MyHeritage has to offer with your 14-day free trial. And if you decide to keep your subscription, you'll get a whole 50% off. Happy exploring. Hello,
Make
and
my
welcome
man
to the
some
first
money.
part in a
Round up.
series I like to call The Second Half of the 1940s is actually really important, but we always brush over it in favor of World War II. World War II is why things changed, but how the world changed for the next 50 plus years is the story of 1945 to 1950. So I want to take a look at the four biggest players in the European theater and take a look at their place in the New World Order. Starting with the most undisputed baddies of history, the Nazis. Take a bet, how many times do you think I can say that word before this video gets demonetized? As you may know, after the First World War, France led an effort to punish Germany really
come on now.
badly, and this led to Germany being a really
That's
sore
fucked up.
loser, blaming the Jews and invading their neighbors. That's why in 1939, as soon as Britain declared war on Germany, the Allies were already working together to come up with a plan for how to handle the country after the war, so that history wouldn't repeat itself. The UK and the United States put out a really important document that's probably going to show up a lot in the rest of this series called the Atlantic Charter, and they made one thing very clear to Germany: this would not be a repeat of 1918. They wouldn't go too heavy with reparations, and they wouldn't be taking any territory. Wait, America? Why are you saying you won't take my land? Do you want me to take your land? We're not even at war yet! Which is why I won't be gaining any territory. Oh, is that why you are signing off on statements about the final destruction of Nazi tyranny? No, that's because you're a head. Now, once the Soviet Union joined the war against Germany,
That's
well,
funny. That's funny as shit, bro. He said, no, that's just because you're a shithead. Like, that's tough.
working in Stalin's vision of the future was a little awkward. The Allies' whole first major conference together was a little awkward. Even working with Stalin in the first place felt like teaming up against the forces of evil with friendship, harmony, incredible violence, and love. And then you'll open a second front in Western Europe, right? Well, we'd better cross our I's and dot our T's and knock out Italy first. You'll cross your I's, and then you'll open a second front. Give us till summer of 44. At this rate, the war's end will have more dead Russians than living Englishmen. And what a happy day that will be. When the war is over, I mean. Now look, opening a second front is easy enough, but how do we close the door on a third war? This is easy part. We round up 50 to 100,000 German officers and shoot them in the head. Oh dear. You'd think 49,000 would be too few. I've had about enough of this. I was only joking. Come back. Stalin is not a man who solves his problems with purges. By the time 1945 rolled around, the trio had put together a plan. The country would be split into 4 zones, administered by the 3 major powers, and also France, as a sign of jolly cooperation. There had been some talks about dividing Germany on a more permanent basis. After all, Germany had only been united for less than a century and had given everyone such a headache in that time. But ultimately, they agreed the division would only last as long as the occupation did. Once Berlin fell and the war was won, the challenge of winning the peace began in earnest. The occupation zones received their final borders, and the Soviet Union, who didn't really care about the Atlantic Charter, took off a chunk of the eastern border to be Poland's consolation prize. The first step was to completely uproot the German legal system. The economy was decentralized, cartels were broken up, and all the Nazi laws on the basis of race, creed, and political opinion were abolished. Then, of course, the justice and educational systems needed their own overhauls, and a new constitution would need to be drafted in order to make sure that the changes would stick. The top brass of the Nazi Party were tracked down as much as possible to be made an example of. 24 men were brought to face trial in Nuremberg for war crimes and crimes against humanity. At the same time, the US, in its portion of the country, began running campaigns showing the horrors of the Holocaust to German civilians. And you know, Germany today has a great track record of coming to terms with its past human rights violations, unlike, well, quite a few other countries.
I mean, hey, that's facts though. Like, you know, every single German person I've ever spoken to always has such remorse about things that they didn't even do. Like, I respect it, right? Because I respect how they could be like, hey, look, my country like, I think the U.S. needs a little more of the, like, you know, acknowledging where they fucked up. Even though I do feel like, as individuals, they hold too much guilt about it, because it's like, it's not, you weren't even, most of the people today, if not everybody today, weren't even alive then. So, like, they can't really, they shouldn't be having so much guilt on their own individual self, like I've seen a couple of people I've talked to have. But I will say, I feel like other countries do need a little more of that, like, yeah, we fucked up back then. We shouldn't have done that. Like, I'll admit the U.S. does, bro. We ain't got no remorse for shit we fucked up about.
So the occupation must have been a huge success. Except, the first couple years were pretty rough. The initial policy of taking no steps to rehabilitate Germany led to intense food shortages, and it wasn't until a report from Herbert Hoover, of all people, and a change in leadership that things began to improve. And yet, when you look at all the surveys of public opinion that the US ran, things didn't seem to be moving in the right direction. Right after the Nuremberg trials, about 6% of Germans said that they were unfair. By 1950, that number was about 33%, and 37% of Germans answered that the extermination of other races was necessary for the security of Germans.
Damn.
Although, in fairness, that one had been phrased weirdly. In 1945, 59% believed that Nazism wasn't a bad idea, and in 1947, that number had risen to 70%. 42% of Germans wanted a new Führer. Meanwhile, the Allies are totally swamped trying to process the millions of Germans who were part of the Nazi Party to determine who the true radicals are to keep them out of power. Imagine having to run a background check on everyone in the country. And imagine trying to do that while pressure is mounting from back home. The war is over. Bring our soldiers back home. We can't take on any more debt. So, for the sake of efficiency, the process became increasingly lax as time went on. Laws about fraternizing with civilians were lifted, German citizens were trained to run the background checks on their neighbors, the whole process was subject to corruption. There were these certificates that said you might have been part of Nazi society, but in your heart of hearts, you weren't really a bad guy. And all of those certificates ended up getting bought and sold on the black market. At a certain point, with few exceptions, everyone under the age of 25 at the time of the war's end was just let free on the grounds that they had just been brainwashed and there was nothing you could do. As time went on, elections were...
That's kind of dumb. Like, oh yeah, let's just have people that were supporting it test to see. Like, okay, that's you know what, it worked out. Like, you know, from everything I see about Germany, it's a good place now, so, you know, it worked out, I guess, but not the brightest move.
Were rolled out, first at the local level, then the regional, and eventually the national level when Germany had been reunited. West Germany, anyway. Stalin was doing Stalin things to the zone he'd occupied. A man named Konrad Adenauer was elected chancellor and called for an end to the denazification process. Of course, the US recognized that the project was not going so well. It was counterproductive and ineffective, so they were willing to let it go, but all the same, "Hey bro, stop picking on the Nazis so hard," is a little scary to hear coming from a German chancellor. And yet, plot twist number 2, progress continued? The Adenauer government, which lasted 14 years, they were the ones who started giving out reparations of their own volition. And with time, the opinions on the Third Reich began to shift again. After those first frightful years of occupation where food was scarce, a new currency tackled the problem of inflation, and investment from the United States kickstarted German exports. The economy started chugging along, and that kind of killed the itch for any radical new government.
I feel like now y'all, especially like, you know, because I have German heritage, but like, you know, I've never spent a moment outside the US, so like real Germans can correct me on this, but I feel a part of it was like y'all kind of got a taste of your own medicine. You're like, maybe we shouldn't be trying to occupy other places. This kind of sucks. We can't eat because, you know, they're stealing all our food. They're kind of beating our ass. Like, this should we really be doing this to other? Like, I feel like that's part of what it was that made y'all turn around a little bit. Would you guys agree with that? Would you not? Let me know, man. Like, that's from the video, the vibe I'm getting is that's because it, without the like hold down and lack of food and the big protest, like we can't work on 800 calories, blah blah blah. You know, like I feel like maybe y'all wouldn't have turned around like you did.
I have to imagine there weren't many people thinking to themselves, "Sure, my life is getting better, but I stubbed my toes this morning, and for that a minority must die!" Perhaps the biggest difference between the end of World War I and World War II is just how overwhelming that defeat really was, and how clear it was that the world was moving on. With the Cold War heating up and with Germany being split between East and West, it was clear that if World War III ever happened, Germans wouldn't just be on the front line. Germany would be the front line. East and West Germany each had to pick a side in a polarized world, and in both cases, making new friends meant no more of that fascist tomfoolery. I'm still not sure what to make of this. Germany changed so dramatically over the course of the 20th century that I was kind of expecting some brilliant master plan, as though the world had cracked the code on how to turn even the most violent...
It seems like low-key we just got lucky. Like, the plan was dumb as shit and didn't work out, but we just got lucky as shit.
Hateful society into a stable, free, and peaceful democracy. That the only reason other occupations have failed is either incompetence or a price tag. Make no mistake, there was a deliberate human element to Germany's recovery. New generations grew up with a chance to reflect on the horrors of the Nazi regime. There are records of many small positive interactions between Germans and occupying soldiers that shaped opinions through word of mouth, acts of kindness, of friendship, of love. But it would seem that what really did the trick wasn't the monumental effort to reshape society, it was the realpolitik of a changing world. I find that a bit chilling. After all, if society can improve in spite of the counterproductive efforts of those with the most power to shape it, what are we supposed to do when the pendulum swings the other way? Join us next time, because the world Germany emerged into in 1950 was a very different place than just 5 years before.
I mean, hey man, this was a really good video. I didn't pause it too much and talk too much because, yeah, being sick fucking blows. But, hey, without further ado, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, you know how it do. You know, for every subscription, maybe I'll feel a little better. Anyway, I'm out. Bye.